Yeah, cheers.
Hello everyone, welcome to this episode of Beyond The Barclay with me, Jez Davies. I don't have a co-host today, so I'm going to introduce my guest tonight straight away, Mr. Andrew Walker. How are you, sir?
I'm really well, thanks, Jez, and thanks for having me on this evening.
Not at all. I think we should probably start with last night's game at Carrow. I'll take it you went, did you?
I did indeed. I was there with my two sons, as usual, in our seats in what for me will always be the lower river end.
Of course. Yeah, and that was so you got a good view of I'll say a good view of the goals. They're all the other end, weren't they? To be fair,
yeah. Every season has a game, right? And we've not had many of those games over the last few seasons. I think probably Coventry at home, where Forsome came on and scored the 2 goals in injury time, is one of those games. And I felt kind of last night was that as well. Probably after the good results we've had, maybe a bit of a free shot, if I'm honest, last night. I felt there was a bit of pressure probably off us. Again, probably the best home game of the season for me, I think, last night.
Completely agree with you. I did watch it on TV last night, actually. It was, it was just, the tempo and the way that we sort of just attacked them from the word go, not attack them in the physical sense, but
they did that.
Yeah, they did that. Yeah, in the football sense, I think we took the game to. I think they were shocked, actually. I know they took the lead, but the second half performance I thought was outstanding, and great to see Ali Ahmed get a goal again. I thought he played really well.
Definitely, and as we're perhaps tonight talking about the characteristics of good young players and coaches and things, I think in Clement we're seeing a real leader. And you're seeing what difference quality leadership makes, because other than Ahmed and the new fullback who didn't play at fullback actually when he came on last night, he's just playing players that he's inherited, and what a difference that's made.
Absolutely. No, I think he's certainly getting a tune out of these players, that more so than what Manning did. But you touched upon obviously the reason we're doing the call tonight. So if you'd perhaps just like to introduce yourself in greater depth, to talk to us a little about what Mr. Walker does for a living, and I think I've given everyone a clue there.
Well, let me probably start my professional beginning. So for 25 years, I was a teacher. I trained in London as a PE teacher. Norfolk is my part of the world. I've been a Norwich fan since I was a boy. And for the majority of my teaching life, I taught at 2 schools in Norfolk that a lot of people will know. One is Wyndham College, and the other is Langley School in Loddon. And it was whilst I was teaching at Langley for 16 years, between 2007 and 2023, that I had the privilege of being deputy headmaster in charge of sports and partnerships.
Amazing.
And alongside the headmaster at the time, a man called Dominic Finley, I led on sports strategy. And that brought about some really exciting things. Worked with organisations like the British Olympic Association, Leicester Tigers Rugby, and of course Norwich City. And for somebody who's been a fan of the club from my only club in my life, that was a professional and personal high for sure.
That's amazing. And who were the key people that were involved at the time that you built that understanding relationship? I guess,
so the partnership kind of came about in the 2014-15 season. Seasons often sort of begin to morph into one, but that season was the one we started off with Neil Adams as manager, and Alex Neil came in, and we won against Middlesbrough in the playoff final at Wembley. I'm sure many people remember that day, and it was what a day out that was. So during that season, there were conversations between Langley and the football club about this idea of working in partnership. At the time, Langley School had a strategy strapline, which people may have seen on LEDs at Carrow Road and on our programme adverts and things like that. And that was passionate about sport, serious about education.
Yeah.
So at the time, a significant number of the Norwich Academy players who were aged between 11 and 16 were actually living and were at school in London.
Right.
you and I have spoken before about how you often have this sort of circle that goes around football clubs. People often talk about things like this 90-minute travel rule.
Yeah.
Well, of course, the majority of 90 minutes around Norwich is actually in the North Sea. And so it makes sense that there's a lot of recruitment from London. And so we had boys who were travelling to and from London to Norwich and back multiple times a week for training and matches. So the club was spending significant money on train tickets and digs, which in old money is where a young player stays with a host family, a bit like a foster carer. So we had young players who were spending 12 hours plus a week on the tube to Liverpool Street and then on the train from Liverpool Street up to Norwich. Now, again, I'm sure many people listening have to do that journey periodically, either for work or for pleasure. I think for most of us to probably do that 3 times a week would be really tough. And if we happen to be 12, 13, 14 years old at the time, certainly even tougher. So conversations started about having this new schools program where pupils or players would live at Langley because it's a boarding school. They would study there because it's a high school for kids aged 11 to 18, broadly speaking. And they could also train there as well. But of course, if the club wanted them to go to Coney, Loddon to Coney is about 20 minutes on a good run. And so from September 2025, which of course was a Premier League season, remember we said we'd won the playoff final at Wembley the previous season, Norwich City had 24 places at Langley. Brilliant. And look, it had lots and lots of benefits, but ultimately well-being, because you're traveling 12 hours less a week. You're getting to bed at a reasonable time. You're getting up at a reasonable time. Academic performance, the majority of the pupils we work with have not gone on to be professional footballers. Statistically, there's no great surprise there. But of course, also on the pitch outcomes. And as we might talk about tonight, there's lots of young players that I've worked with who've gone on and are currently enjoying professional careers.
Amazing. I think that'd be quite a good point just to move on to the next question, actually, because I think you summed that up really well. What has it been like teaching those players that have come through who are part of the Norwich City Academy, and how do you think football commitments influence? I'm just reading the questions, by the way. I'm not.
No, you're fine.
How do you think? How do their football commitments influence your approach at the classroom?
And I should just sort of précis what I'm going to say now, which is that professionally in 2023, I left Langley after 16 years and I set up my own education consultancy, which is what I do now. And I work with families from all around the world who are looking at UK boarding schools and UK education for their children, which is a really exciting job. And I also help schools still that are looking to develop their strategy through sport. And whilst Langley and Norwich City was quite pioneering at the time, the Premier League described it in an inspection in about 2016 as industry leading. Most football clubs now are working with schools in a similar kind of arrangement. So you asked me about, what was it like teaching pupils who are part of the academy? Well, of course, when somebody's 12 or 13 years old, Tony Springett, Jonathan Rowe, for example, they're just kids like any other pupil. And so when I was at Langley leading on that program, we worked really, really hard to never identify them just as Norwich City boys. Ultimately,
and sorry, Andrew, just to clarify, these 2 lads were at Langley, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, these were 2 of many. And obviously, Tony, we're singing his name from the stands at the moment. And John has gone on and scored a goal in the Euro Under-21s final, and has had probably quite a high-profile career to date for both positive and negative reasons. So we worked really hard that these boys were just pupils in the school. There were a good number of them, and it would have been very easy just to identify them as the Norwich City boys. But you'd never identify any one group by a kind of a term like that. So we were used at Langley to teaching pupils who competed at the top level in their sport. I've worked with kids who've played rugby for England at age group rugby, under 16, under 18. Same for hockey. I've had kids who've kayaked for Great Britain. young adults now who would be aspiring to be at the Los Angeles Olympics, for example, in a couple of years. So there's, in a sense, when you're working with academy footballers, the approach is pretty similar, actually. So the key thing actually is that as a teacher, you've just got to be flexible. Players had at the time and still have today what is known as day release. Now, that sounds a rather sort of prison type term, but essentially day release is when a youngster is out of school, typically a day a week, and that would be up at Coney. And so at Langley, we actually wrote our timetable for the whole school with this as our starting point, and even scheduled extra lessons for the boys on other days of the week until sort of 4:45, which meant that they didn't fall behind academically. All of the boys, for example, sat GCSE PE 1 year early in year 10 when they were 15 years of age. So along with the football club, we worked really hard to map out also times in the year when obviously football would take precedent, but also times when school had to come first as well. So a really good example of this, and something that's often talked about in the media, was for the school to be really sensitive when scholarship decisions are being made. So obviously somebody between the age of 16 and 18, who we might describe as being of sixth form age, year 12 and year 13, at the football club, that's when they go full time. We used to call those YTS trainees back when I was a kid. Okay. So the decisions for those are often made in year 11 when somebody's 15 or 16 years of age. It can be earlier. That's a huge life moment for these young boys. And so being sensitive around when that was happening was really important. But obviously making sure that in the run up to GCSE exams, for example, pupils are really focused on their exams. Because for every Tony Springett and Jonathan Rowe, there's at least 3 or 4, and believe you me, that was a really good strike rate, who have not gone on to have professional football careers, and so are absolutely reliant on the academic qualifications that they got at school. Now, when I said about being flexible, of course, you won't be surprised to hear that there were times when football placed real last-minute demands. Imagine that a star player gets injured in the first team. What happens is that it cascades upwards. So somebody in the same position from the under-21s gets called up for the first team squad. Somebody in the 18s gets called up to the 21s. And all of a sudden, your 15, 16-year-old is playing in an FA Youth Cup game at Carrow Road with 24 hours notice. And that's just going to happen. And you have to face that. But it's about the club and any education setting working together to know when the pressure times are going to be on in football, and they will be, but also when education has to take its priority as well. And that's that duty of care.
That's really interesting. And I think as well, for sort of follow-up question that before we move on would be, how much involvement would the football club have in terms of like their school report and stuff? Would they want to see that, or would that still be the parents' responsibility?
Well, so really in that case, so traditionally in schooling, you would talk about a triangle, which would be pupil, parent and school. Now, in this sense, really what we had was a rectangle, a square, if you will, which was pupil, parent, school, football club. And I'm going to just give a shout out to 2 people that were involved right at the start. A guy called Mark Hallam, again, like me, was from a PE teaching background, was the head of education at the football club. And another guy called Jimmy Unwin, who's gone on to coach at clubs like Leyton Orient and Cambridge. And we worked really, really closely together. And they kind of applied that, almost that Coach Carter mentality, that actually it's not a free pass to football. And actually what it is it's joined up thinking. So it wasn't just about school reports. It was actually more at a micro level than that, which might be actually, do you know what? This child's not done their homework 3 times in a row. Well, actually, I'm afraid you're not coming to Coney to train this evening. And accountability, whether it's on the pitch or in the classroom or in any walk of life, is really, really important. And we work really, really closely together as a club and a school. And that was one of the great successes of the partnership.
No, that's amazing. I think, as you say, it's almost like, I don't want to use the word discipline, but it's a little bit of a discipline thing, isn't it? If they're having to do the work at school, they're then getting rewarded by having been able to train and being able to do what physically they want to do.
Yeah, and there's no pretending that that's an easy thing, because it's not. By definition, the football training is physically hard. It's often late in the afternoon or in the evenings. You come back, and I remember the boys coming back into the boarding house. They were Hank Marvin. These kids, they're trained and they're just consuming calories. And you know what it's like if you're trying to go to bed hungry at night. That's really difficult. And it was a full, almost 24-hour day managed time. And there were very few hours where they were not planned to be doing something.
No, that's really good. And I think, discipline was a word I used just then, but it comes quite nicely into the next question. So, the academy players bring particular qualities such as discipline, teamwork, or resilience that you notice compared to other students.
Yeah. So, there's kind of two answers to that, really. Specifically, academy footballers, the answer is no, actually. In terms of elite athletes across all sporting disciplines, yes. Absolutely, 100%. So actually, let me big him up here. So Johnny Rowe is a great example of a player who missed significant footballing time during high school due to injury. Okay. Yeah. As 13, 14, 15-year-old, season defining injuries. Now, that's really frustrating, because actually you've got this idea of where you want to get to. That's about being a professional footballer. And being injured is not part of that narrative, whether you are a 30-year-old pro or a 14-year-old boy or girl. That's just not part of it. And Johnny also had obstacles off the pitch, no different to any other teenager. And I'm a parent of a 15 and a 20-year-old, and my boys, have been through similar challenges as teenage boys than the likes of Johnny when he was 14, 15.
Of course.
The thing about Johnny, in terms of discipline, teamwork, resilience, is that Johnny Rowe was absolutely 100% convinced that he would go on and be a pro footballer and play for England.
Yeah.
And I remember at times thinking, this is almost blind faith, but he was absolutely convinced that that was what he was going to do.
Yeah.
Now, whilst the England bit necessarily isn't completed yet, actually scoring the winning goal in the under-21 Euros last summer is not a bad stepping stone.
Of course.
Whether as Norwich fans we have a positive view of him or not, the reality is that the kid scored a winning goal in a under-21 Euros for his country. He's played in the Champions League, and in Marseille, he's played for one of the, I would say, the top two biggest clubs in France, PSG and Marseille, probably.
Of course.
Okay.
No, I think so. And I think as well as that, Angie, just sorry to interrupt. I think it must be a tremendous, what's the word I'm looking for here? Almost showing how good that program was, that when you see players like Johnny Rowe coming through that school system, and then all of a sudden they are in that kind of situation. But even Tony Springett, that, much maligned. And I think, there has been some comments online about him. And I think, well, you don't actually see what he's had to go through to get to that situation. And I think someone like yourself that has seen that journey, I guess, must think, when you see those comments, you must think, oh, hang on.
A simple statement before I just give another example. Tony Springett has shown resilience.
Of course.
No, nobody's going to disagree with that at all. And there would have been times for Tony where the easy thing would have been to have gone and done something else. And he's a bright boy, okay, a bright young man. And he could have gone on and done something else. Now, the other thing at Langley, which was really cool, and for me as a PE teacher by background, it was really great to see the younger boys, probably 11 to 14-year-old, also get involved with other sports. Once somebody gets towards 15, 16 and beyond, we talk about single sport specialism. You're a footballer at that point of view, but at that point in time. But for youngsters, when sport is just fun and you want them to enjoy it, getting involved with other sports that they might be less competent at than they are at football, it was really, really good. And I would think of rugby in particular as an example of that. New skills, but applying a lot of the leadership and teamwork skills that they'd learnt in football in another setting. If I think about kids that I've worked with, 10, 11, 12, 13, it's just about having fun. And that's really important, even if you're a great footballer. So, you know, there were other times as well, talking about resilience, where it was really hard to see, probably by 15, 16, what I'd kind of begin to call young men, certainly adolescents, who were having that sole dream and focus of being a professional footballer, having it paused or in some cases ended as well. And that's a really, really tough thing. And that's a bit that in the media has been talked about a lot. There've been articles and criticisms of professional clubs and the way that they, for want of a better word, offload players who don't make the grade. And that was never easy to see. However, when you've got these players and they've got resilience and they've got teamwork and leadership and problem solving and things like that, and they've developed those skills through football, those are really, really transferable skills in the wider world,
in the business world as well.
There's a survey done called the Deloitte Millennial Survey. If you're a real, got nothing better to do, look it up. Okay. And the Deloitte Millennial Survey places subject-specific academic knowledge really, really low on the list of the most important things for people going into the world of work to have. It is problem solving, it's adaptability, it's leadership, it's teamwork.
Yeah.
And I taught kids 25 years ago when I was first starting out, who have gone on to do careers that didn't even exist 25 years ago. So actually, that's why those subject-specific knowledge things are actually a bit less important. But those skills, we might call them soft skills, interpersonal skills, they're really key. And all of those boys coming through that academy program, whether they made it as footballers or not, were really skilled in those areas.
And I think you mentioned as well, when we caught up last week, I think you said about the fact that, say, for instance, in their first school year they didn't make it, Norwich then carried on and paid for the rest of their
absolutely. And look, huge kudos, because and again, there's nothing here that's in any way confidential, but I want to give credit because it's a partnership that's reached its end over the last few years, that Norwich City committed that if they made a footballing decision to remove in those 8 days a boy from the programme because he wasn't going to be offered a scholarship, that they committed to his education through to the end of GCSE education.
That's incredible. Absolutely incredible.
It's absolutely incredible. And, I'm a Norwich supporter. I have been since I was a boy. And at times I've felt distance from the club, as we all have. And games like last night and Big Phil there on the pitch at the end, we feel united. And I felt really proud as a supporter to be working on a programme where actually, first and foremost, they were looking out for these young men and giving them life transforming opportunities. And
that's great.
And that was massive.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, touching on obviously the football side of it, then as you've just, it's quite a nice segue. So, I mean, as a Norwich City season ticket holder since 1989, congratulations, by the way.
So I get like a carriage clock or something like that from somebody at some point, I think.
Potentially. How has your lifelong support of the club shaped your perspective when teaching players who dream of making it at Carrow Road?
Yeah, that's a really, really, really solid question, actually. I think history is really important when it comes to a club. And you asked me about kind of what my memories were a little bit of being a supporter. Considering we're talking about tonight players age, let's say 11 to 16-year-olds, when Norwich win the first Premier League season, and football did exist before the Premier League, I need to say that. But that first Premier League season and the European season, I was aged between 15 and 17. So those were huge times for me. I mean, do you want me to just give a little view as to my recollections of those times?
Yeah, by all means, go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. So
that's why you're here.
Yeah, thank you. So, I mean, my first ever game was Norwich City against Charlton Athletic in 1988. They lost that day, ironically. I should have probably known at that point. It was setting me up for a life of ups and downs. So I started going in that season. They were doing really, really well. They reached obviously FA Cup semi-final that year. And by the time I was kind of year 10, 11 at high school, they finished third in the Premier League, which was just nuts. Because, third in the Premier League now is a Champions League place, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know whether you're old enough or not, but we had to rely on Arsenal beating Sheffield Wednesday in an FA Cup final replay to get this place in the UEFA Cup. Because back in the day, I think it was one place for the European Cup, one for the UEFA Cup, and then it was all of this Cup Winners' Cup bit as well. Anyway, so we ended up in the UEFA Cup, and I went to all three of the home games. Vitesse Arnhem at home, I remember it was only about 15,000 there, really disappointing crowd. Won comfortably 3-0 on the night. And then the away leg was 0-0. Now, what I do remember about the away leg was, although I didn't go to the Netherlands, on the Saturday I'd been up at Goodison watching Efene Kuku score 4 goals in a 5-1 away win at Everton.
Wow.
And bless him, on the midweek against Vitesse away, he had glorious chances, and bless him, he didn't take any of them. But 3-0 at home, 0-0 away, jobs are good, and really. Yeah. And then obviously Bayern away, and I wasn't allowed to go. And it's a bit like one of those things. People in my generation say, they wanted to go and see Queen at Wembley in 1986 and their parents wouldn't let them. Well, my parents wouldn't let me go to Bayern away either. And I just remember watching the game, and it was John Motson commentary. Look, we've all heard it. And all of a sudden we're 2-0 up kind of out of nowhere. And obviously Gossi's goal and all that kind of stuff. And Gunn makes that save from Adolfo Valencia when it's 2-1. And I just remember the home game, watching Lothar Matthäus play at Carrow Road. That guy in 1990 had lifted the World Cup for what was then West Germany. Conceded early at home, but Gossi does it again. And what I will say, as somebody who's been a teacher for a lot of years, I pitied my teachers the next day because we were unteachable the day after that result. And then we kind of drew Inter, and I remember thinking and having genuine conversations with my two best mates at the time, who I went to all the games with, saying, actually, if we beat Inter, we're going to win this.
Yeah.
And a lot of people forget that Inter was the round before the quarterfinals. So we were in the last 16. You think about a side now making the last 16 in the Europa League, for example. That's real progress.
Of course.
And I remember... the home game, we played well, Bergkamp penalty. But again, players, Salvatore Schillaci, who'd won the Golden Boot at World Cup 1990, was a sub actually for Inter. And Walter Zenga in goal, my word.
Yes.
There's a goalkeeper. And we kind of felt that it was all over after the first leg. And then the second leg was at about 2:30 in the afternoon.
Bizarre, isn't it? Bizarre timing.
And we all obviously had the afternoon off school. We either bunked or just left. And I can't remember whether school allowed us the afternoon off or not. But anyway, we went home and a load of us gathered and watched the game. And we battered them, actually. Amazing. And then I think probably it was another late goal by Bergkamp. And, that was it. We were out. And for me as a Norwich fan, and it's interesting to talk about, we're talking about key moments, pivotal moments in these young boys' lives. I think for our football club, the aftermath of losing at Inter was a real pivotal moment. There were lots of calls at the time for Chase to back Mike Walker with money and really push on. And actually at the time we were in a decent place. I can't remember. We might have been top 6, top 7 in the league. Well, he didn't. Walker left in the January. Rule Fox, one of my favourite players, went and left in the January window. Sutton followed in the summer. And by May 1995, 18 months later, we were in what was, I think, at the time, the Ensley Championship, opening the season away at Luton, And for me, that was probably the moment, sort of sliding doors where it can go in either direction. So as I've waxed lyrical to you a bit about the history, it was something I took great pleasure in telling the boys about. And
amazing.
One thing they would have never doubted is Mr. Walker a Norwich City fan? And I hope that came through also in the interest that I showed in them as young players as well, certainly.
I think it's important that someone like yourself, I mean, you know, any of your teachers at Langley, but certainly someone that is such a passionate Norwich fan, was able to share those memories, because I'm sure the club would have, you know, run through and said, oh yeah, we were third in the league and we were this, we were that, we beat Bayern Munich, but then without actually living it, I think it's so important to listen to someone that's actually lived there and been there.
Yeah. I mean, I'm very fortunate in my personal and professional life that people like Darren Eadie, Rob Newman, Jerry Goss, I now count as friends. And if I'd said that to 15-year-old Andrew, that, you know, they were my heroes. You know, Rob Newman captained Norwich City against in the San Siro against Inter Milan. Yeah. Jerry Goss scored probably 3 of the best goals I've ever scored for Norwich. Leeds away, last game in front of the Kop at Anfield, and the Olympic Stadium in Munich.
That's a quiz question, that one, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and these were great people. And I think for the boys that were coming through, one of the things that the club did really well was to talk about this homegrown talent, you know. And I think even right now, actually, Norwich is kind of crying out for the next Sutton, the next Eadie, not just a player that comes through the academy, but a generational talent that comes through the academy. You know, we've had really, really good players, but as happened with Chris and with Darren as well, they outgrow the football club. Max Aaron's a good example of a player who outgrew the football club ultimately. The Murphy twins, I suppose, is another good example, you know. And I suppose that's the challenge. And look, that's what's great at the moment about Tony. And I will Tony to do well, because actually he's a kid who I think since the age of 11 has been at that football club. So he's been there 10, 11 years already. Yeah. So he gets it. He absolutely gets it.
I think his goal against Walsall the other day showed that, didn't it? I think it showed that, you know, everyone on the bench behind Philip Clement was, I think the famous quote from him was, I thought the Tony Springett fan club was sitting behind me.
Nice.
Which is great.
We love a hometown hero, don't we? And I thought the choice of music by the football club on their socials, they went with Frank Sinatra's I Did It My Way. And I think they really recognised the significance of that moment in that young man's life.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
That was huge.
No, it was massive. And I think, you know, full credit to yourself and the team at Langley as well for giving him that sort of push in the right direction, I suppose.
And I will say this for Tony as well, supportive parents. And look, for somebody who is a parent and has been a teacher for a lot of years, supportive parenting makes such a difference. And Tony's mum was a massive supporter of him and a massive supporter of what he was getting educationally at Langley, to the extent that there was no doubt she was putting education front and centre. And if that boy didn't do it in the classroom, he wasn't going to get the opportunity to do it on the football pitch. And there is a young man who made the most of the opportunity that was presented to him. And in the vast majority of cases, the kids that I've worked with who've gone on to pro actually made the most of the opportunity. And that's great, because hard work does pay off.
Yeah, I think one example, which I don't think he went to Langley, I think he was at Norwich School, was Tom Adeyemi, who came through.
I know Tom very well.
Yeah, I think, wasn't he studying to be a doctor at one point? Or at least, yeah. And, it just shows, doesn't it?
If I remember correctly, and I was a teacher at Wyndham College at the time, Tom got an offer of a full-time scholarship at 16 with the football club. And I'm not guessing on this, but I'm trying to recall, he actually stayed at school full-time for sixth form and got his A-levels whilst also training with the football club.
He did, yeah. Because funny enough, my auntie used to teach at that school, so she knew Tom really well. And
good stuff.
Yeah, he was a good character, I think. So I mean, we're nearly at the end of the set questions, but I've got a couple more for you before I let you go. But so just to sort of, we obviously talked about the European journey already. So based on your experience as both a teacher and a lifelong fan, what advice do you give young players about handling pressure, setbacks, and the realities of a football career?
Yeah, that's really tough, isn't it? And
Mm.
I'm always humble of the fact that when you are working in that setting, that there are young people who do listen to what you say, and therefore being considered and saying the right thing is really, really important. You know, all of us can think about teachers in our lives who had positive impacts on us. We can probably also think about teachers that didn't. So being one of those who has and does was something that I took and my colleagues took really, really seriously. So let's start not with a piece of advice, but a bit of reality, because actually as an aspiring young footballer, the reality is harsh, right? Statistically, less than 1% of kids who set out to be pro footballers will make it as a pro footballer. Even of those, very, very few are still will actually have a career that is what I would describe as a career that takes them into their 30s. You know, there'll be plenty who sign a 1-year pro at 18, but by 19, they've fallen by the wayside. So statistically, with a very big base, the tip of the pyramid is extremely small.
Yeah.
So we are dealing with the best of the best of the best. And that's a harsh reality.
Mm-hmm.
But I've in a program that Norwich had with Langley, where they'd pre-selected what they considered the best of the best and put them in the best environment, we saw a disproportionately high number of players make it professionally from that program. So 3 things really that I would give as takeaways, even if somebody's listening tonight and that's what they want to do. Now, the first thing is this, and that is that success and winning are 2 very, very different things. Okay. As a PE teacher and a bit of a North American sports fan, I read a book by a man called John Wooden. It's a bit of a legendary UCLA basketball coach. Was coached there for, I think, 27 years between 1948 and the sort of late 1970s. Anyway, he defined success as being, and I know this quote off by heart, peace of mind, which is a direct result of knowing that you did your best to become the best that you are capable of becoming. And I would always say to youngsters, don't focus on the winning, focus on trying to become successful. And often if you're successful, in other words, you've got the traits of a successful person, winning is often a byproduct that will follow.
Yeah.
Okay. And so for me, that's really important. Focus on being successful, not just on winning. There are lots and lots of footballers out there who, in the eyes of trophies, will never win, but they will have very, very successful careers. Now, Harry Kane has overcome that now. He's won trophies in Germany, but nobody would have said that man wasn't a successful professional footballer.
Goals he scored in the Premier League.
Yeah, absolutely. The next thing is this, that parallel planning is absolutely key. So focus on being successful and not just on winning, but parallel plan. Football is a multi-billion-dollar industry. And there are careers aplenty in the football industry, especially for those who've got international connections and are keen to travel. I showed you the front of the Norwich programme the day I went. If we looked at a Norwich City team photo from 1988, there'd have been the players and probably physio, manager and assistant coach, something like that on there. If we looked at Norwich City's 2025, 26 team photo, there will be as many staff on there as there are footballers almost, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's reality. So football is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and there are careers in it. So doing your best to become a professional player whilst parallel planning for a career in the industry is really, really good advice, because you're more likely to have a career in the industry than you are be a pro.
No, I agree.
The best kids I worked with at Langley didn't become a pro, but he's now one of the chief data analysts for the Manchester City group. Living the dream. Living the dream.
And that's the thing. And I think, you know, and I always look at, I was working at Stevenage Football Academy for a little while. And I don't know if you saw the the Man City game at the weekend as the referee for Halam.
Yeah.
He was in the academy at Stevenage.
Amazing.
Didn't make it as a footballer, so decided to take up refereeing, and now
he's now
he's
refereeing in the Premier League.
There you go. So
he's closer to the Premier League than you and I will ever be.
Completely agree, and I think he made it. I actually think he made a really good call that game against Wolves as well with the penalty. But
definitely,
I think he was very brave. I think a lot of referees might have just not, gone with the VAR call, but he had his convictions not to. So
we could do with more of that, I think.
I think so.
Then finally, the last kind of tip I'd give is this: is that just because you're not necessarily a pro at 17, 19, even 2021. Doesn't mean you've missed your opportunity. I had the absolute privilege of appointing Grant Holt as director of football at Langley. Holty's a great guy. And at the age of 21, Holty was fitting tyres. Okay. If you are good enough, keep going, and the opportunity will come along eventually. And not everybody is going to go through that trajectory where they're best at 11, 13, 15, 17, and they're playing in the Premier League by the time they're 18, okay?
Yeah.
There are ups and downs in that, as with any walk of life. And in terms of sports science, we mature differently at different rates. Yeah. I was a great footballer when I was 15. I'm as tall today at 48 as I was when I was 15.
Yeah, me and you both.
Okay? I just grew in other ways. So... yeah, it just because you get knocked down once, that might not be your time.
No, absolutely.
And a boy that exemplifies that is Sonny Carey. Okay, Sonny Carey was with Norwich, got released when he was 16. Went through the lower leagues. He's at Charlton at the moment, playing in the Championship. Went to Blackpool. Sorry, scored goals up there. And he's doing really well. And he's enjoying that career that we talked about. He's probably now 24, 25.
Yeah.
He's got a sustainable career as a Championship footballer.
Yeah.
At 16, somebody decided he wasn't good enough.
Yeah, and that could have been down to, any number of things like height, weight, or whatever else, couldn't it? And they could have just gone, no, he's too small to play or something.
He wasn't good enough then.
Yeah, exactly.
Moment,
yeah, and he's got the bit between his teeth and proved himself that he is. So that's brilliant. So just before we came on, you were showing me some other programs and stuff. I mean, just for the YouTube viewers, not the Apple.
Yeah, absolutely. So
you can just show what you got. First, what you got.
Yeah, absolutely. I've just got, other than Charlton in October 1988, my first ever game, I've got just 3 of the European programs. So Johnny Polston,
legend,
came up from Spurs. So that's the home program against Vitesse Arnhem. Yeah. Philip Cocu was probably the best standout name. And Raymond van der Gaal was in goal for Vitesse that night, actually. That's my absolute prize one. So that's the away game in Bayern. That's normally kept in a plastic wallet and doesn't come out. But
all in German, I assume.
Yeah, except a little bit in there. And there's the sort of the team profiles. So bless him, you've got Daryl Such being talked about on the same page as Lothar Matthäus. It's not often that happened, bless him. And then Inter at home, Gary Megson. It's funny how players don't look that old anymore, do they?
No.
When they're playing.
No, Gary Megson always looks about 50, doesn't he?
My word. Zenga in goal, Bergamy, Shalimov, Battistini, Davide Fontelan, Dennis Bergkamp, Ruben Sosa. That wasn't a bad forward line.
Ruben Sosa, what a player he was.
So, was he Uruguayan, if I remember correctly? Is that right? Ruben Sosa?
I thought he's Portuguese, but I might be thinking of someone else.
Yeah, but that was, they were heady days. And look, who knows? Who knows? If we see, you see some of these teams get into the Premier League and qualify even for the Conference League. And I hope that my boys get to see Norwich City play in Europe.
He was sorry to interrupt. He was Uruguayan, by the way.
Was he?
I just googled it. Yeah.
I can remember the unimportant stuff, just not the date of my kid's birth and things like that. So I'm no surprise there. But so just precious possessions really.
Course,
and I don't keep many, but I keep a few. I've got FA Cup semi-finals, last game at Anfield with the old cop.
Yeah.
Things like that. So yeah, and also a couple of weird ones, like for example, one of the games that didn't happen because of COVID.
Okay.
Sounds a bit of a weird one, really, but one day in 20, 30 years' time, we'll tell our grandkids about COVID, I'm sure. So
yeah, no, I'm sure. Yeah, I think that will come around again. It's not the actual disease, hopefully. But yeah, I think the subject will. Okay, just before we finish, then, Andrew, let's have some predictions for this season. Where do you think we're going to finish?
Look, we're not getting relegated. That ship has sailed, and I was pretty confident about that. Probably even 6 weeks ago, if I'm honest.
Yeah, likewise.
We saw signs pretty early on with Clement that wasn't going to be the case. Head says a nice mid-table finish. You build for next season. Heart says, crikey, we're 11 points off the playoff, and if the league season had started on the day that Clement came in, I think we'd be third in the table right now.
Yeah, correct.
So let's give it a good go. We've got some good games coming up at home. I'm also looking forward to the derby. And when Manning was manager, I wasn't looking forward to the derby. So, do you know what? Again, it's a free shot. Let's just go and win as many games as football as we can do. And I've got no doubt that we'll be an even better side next season with him in charge.
Yeah, no, 100%. Angie, thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure to get to know you.
Thanks
and
for
a
the
little bit
invitation,
more about
Jez.
Not at all. And let's keep in touch. And let's hope your prediction, the heart prediction, comes right. And we might sneak into the back door.
You never know. You
never know with this team. Okay, so for everyone else watching, please like and subscribe on our channel for more great content. We are also available on Facebook, Instagram, and X. You can watch the show on YouTube as well as listen to us on Apple and Spotify. Proudly supported by Masterseal and Pye Design, and we are part of the talkSPORT fan network. I've been Jez Davies. And I've been Andrew.
And I've been Andrew Walker.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone, on the Ball City.